Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my secluded hideaway. We are under a stay-at-home order here in the state of Washington, and a lot of us are going a little stir-crazy. Now, myself, I have been designated an essential worker, so I have still been going to work. But we've kind of been alternating 1 week on, 1 week off to sort of minimize our exposure. So I'm beginning my week off, quote unquote. I'm still working from home, but what do you do when you're stuck at home? You experiment with recipes, you try out new hobbies, whatever. Or you day drink, because let's face it, work is the bane of the drinking class. So, my sister-in-law challenged me. She gave me a link to an article from Atlas Obscura, which is a great website, by the way, and I'll include a link to this down in the comments below. But it talks about a beverage, or sort of a class of beverages, called plague water. I know it sounds really tasty, but basically in the medieval ages, medieval times, they had wave upon wave of Black Death, of the bubonic plague, interspersed with a little soupçon of cholera every now and then too. And they didn't understand what causes disease. The germ theory of disease wouldn't come for another 450, 500 years. So they believed that disease was caused by an imbalance of the bodily humors. There are 4 humors, and we're not going to go into that. But anyway, it's an internal imbalance of these sort of mystical natural forces. And it was brought on by miasma. In other words, a bad smell would actually cause your humors to get out of balance, and thus you would get sick and die. So they thought nice smelling things would counteract the miasma. And in a sense it does. I mean, it covers up the bad smell, but if you can't smell the bad smell, you won't get sick. Obviously, that doesn't work. But it didn't stop them from trying, and what they did was they took a lot of very aromatic herbs and distilled them with alcohol in order to create this tonic, highly alcoholic tonic that they called plague water, and they used it as sort of a drinkable prophylactic drug against the plague. It didn't really work. Not a really big surprise. Some folks back east, according to the article, decided to try and revive the concept of plague water. Now, it's a little difficult to do because they didn't have a license to actually distill alcohol. And the recipe is highly variable. Back in the Middle Ages, they were just throwing handfuls of whatever herbs they could get a hold of, and herbs and spices and tree bark and all sorts of things into the pot, and then distilled it with alcohol into this tincture. And some of them were downright toxic. Some of the ingredients were actually carcinogenic, downright poisonous, psychoactive in a couple of cases. So, yeah, not so good. So we're trying to recreate the spirit, pardon the pun, of plague water without actually doing our own distilling and everything. Now, the recipe that they have, my sister-in-law said she wanted me to try their recipe, but it calls for Bekarovka liqueur, which I'd never heard of, and I have yet to find anyone who sells it in my area. I'd have to do a lot more hunting around it. Right now, not supposed to leave the house. It also has chartreuse in it, which is another very herbal, kind of a greenish liqueur, hence the name chartreuse, the name of the color. I also don't have that, but thinking back on it, because the quote-unquote recipe for plague water was highly, highly variable in terms of what herbs you put into it, how long it steeps, how strong the alcohol is, it could really be anything that you want that is herbal. So, so this is my first opportunity to discuss pantry cooking. What if you're stuck at home? If you're under quarantine, or just for whatever reason you can't leave the house to get supplies, or you just don't feel like it, and you really want X, whatever it is, in this case, this cocktail. What do? Well, you look at the constituent ingredients and you decide what those ingredients actually do in the overall recipe. What role do they perform? And see if you have something that you can substitute. So, I went through my liquor cabinet. First thing that I pulled out was this wee little dram of Jägermeister. I don't remember why I have this. I think it was a joke. I don't like Jägermeister, but it is actually a distillation that is made with a little more than that. 55 or 56, it doesn't even say on this bottle. I think it was like 55 or 56 different herbs, spices, etc. And and I don't know if it's just been sitting around for 10 years, so maybe it's mellowed. It's actually not as bad as I recall. There's a little bit of an anise flavor. It's not as strong as ouzo or Rocky or anything like that, or absinthe, but it has a little bit of black licorice flavor. There's actually a sweetness to it, almost like sort of a caramel flavor, a little something else, but a little bit of herbal, a little bit of an herbal note. I found this, which actually, once I got Google Translate to work, I've had this for 10 years, and I didn't have Google Translate back then, so I had no idea what this was. A friend of me brought it for me. He may have told me what it was at the time, but I had no idea. I finally got Google Translate to work, and it's a plum wine. I don't know how long this stuff is supposed to last. Just a few drops of each of these, by the way. I'm not getting hammered here. Kind of strong. Based on the sort of tingle on my tongue. 40 proof, maybe. So it is a fortified plum wine. Still tastes okay. I got vermouth. It's mostly for cooking. This is an extra dry. I brought this out because even though it's not in it anymore, vermouth, it's a little bit much, comes from the German Vermut, wormwood. Vermouth was the original. Before they actually made absinthe, they made vermouth. Because of the mid-20th century ban on absinthe in the United States, and elsewhere through Europe for that matter, vermouth wasn't made with wormwood. It hasn't been made with wormwood for a long time. And even after the restrictions on absinthe were lifted, vermouth, they continued to leave the wormwood out, but it still has a certain sort of sour, this is old vermouth, but sort of a sour, almost sort of mushroomy flavor to it. There's an earthy and an herbal note to it. Thought would be kind of nice. And in my freezer, I had this, which is rose vodka. Now, all I did was I took some edible rose petals and dumped them into some halfway decent vodka. Not expensive vodka, but not the cheap stuff that's only good for cuts and bruises either. I thought that a nice, these are very, very herbal and kind of bitter. So a sort of floral accent to it I thought would be nice. And to kind of round everything out, I have gin. It's just Tanqueray. It's extra dry London gin. And the recipe calls for honey sage syrup. And I just made this about half an hour ago. Basically in a small saucepan, half a cup of water, half a cup of honey, and about a tablespoon of roughly chopped fresh sage leaves. Bring it up to a simmer, let it sort of simmer for a few minutes, and then just turn the heat off, and I just let it cool and steep. And it does have this lovely sage aroma and flavor, which I think will add to this quite well. Now, with the gin and vermouth, sounds like I'm making a martini. So I thought I would serve it in a martini glass. But it's not a martini. Obviously, there's more stuff in it. I'm not going to be paying attention to the correct proportions of vermouth and gin. Matter of fact, it's going to be more vermouth than gin. What is known as a perfect martini, and what makes that perfect, I don't know, is actually equal proportions of the two, as opposed to the classic sort of standard martini, which is 6 parts gin to 1 part vermouth. Or if you're the type of person who sort of turns their nose up at vermouth, you basically fill the glass with gin and then just sort of wave it in the direction of Italy. It's your choice, but this is my cocktail. So, in a shaker. Oh, by the way, martinis. We should probably stress martinis are stirred. Whatever James Bond says, he is incorrect. Martinis are stirred, not shaken. There's a good reason for it. Shaking it, if you actually put it in a shaker with some ice, shake it up, it's going to cause too much of the ice to melt. It's going to water down the drink. Whereas if you stir it, less melting, at least right away. It comes out as a stronger, more assertive drink. Unless you like it watered down. It's your choice again. But here we go. Jägermeister. Now, I'm going to make 2 servings for this because I'm going to force Chris to drink it. So, ½ ounce per serving. It's going to come, ooh, that's almost perfect. Jägermeister. Where's my plum wine? There's my plum wine. And this is a good way of using up these really random alcohols that I have in my cabinet. ½ ounce per serving of that. My rose vodka. ½ ounce for that. You'll note I do not have the correct barware. I don't care. Vermouth. 1 ounce. Or ½ ounce per serving. Gin. For that pine fresh sort of flavor. And my honey sage syrup. I'm gonna go 2 ounces. I kind of like my cocktails a little sweeter than a lot of people do. Ice. I know it's kind of a cardinal sin to actually put your ice in afterwards, but I'm doing it. Practice that with a shake weight. Do I have the strainer in? And here's my second serving. Want to make sure that they're about equal, so I'm not much of a bartender, so I don't have a practiced eye to figure out exactly where the midpoint is. So here we are. My take on plague water. Kind of looks like unfiltered apple juice, to be honest. Meaty aroma of gin coming off the top. It's almost like a floater. There's the rose vodka. This is actually quite pleasant. It brings out the citrus notes of the gin. The rose vodka is definitely very present in the very beginning. And it almost has sort of a apricot-y sort of flavor. It's not overly sweet. I was expecting, with my adding more of the syrup than it called for, I was expecting it to be a lot sweeter, but that is not half bad. Now, I'm sure this looks quite plain, so probably would benefit from a garnish with, I don't know, a sprig of lavender or a twist of lemon. But the benefits of day drinking. So, that's my take on plague water. I hope you enjoyed watching this. And I'm going to try and do some more videos in the coming days now that I'm stuck at home. And in particular, focusing on some of the things that I can cook with the ingredients I already have on hand. So, until next time, I'm Mike Uyak, and thanks for watching.